Hello everyone, this is going to be a review for Final Fantasy XIII, the 13th game of the Final Fantasy series. One of the most controversial games of the series because to many it either heavily innovated the series or for some it ruined what made the Final Fantasy series the Final Fantasy series. Now this is going to be a review where you're going to hear the things that you want to hear about, such as how the game plays, what the game plays like, and whether or not it may or may not appeal to you. I'm not going to waste time saying the entire game is bad because of one problem, or going to completely praise the game because I'm a fanboy. This is not about giving the game a number score. This is a new type of review style where instead of relying on fancy editing, I tell you what the game plays like and I give you my honest thoughts on it and what type of player this may or may not appeal to. So Final Fantasy XIII was developed and released in 2009 by Square Enix for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 consoles. And I initially did not play it back then, and I only played it recently, but I figured that me being able to review this game that came out a few years back, which was very controversial, would offer a fresh opinion on the game, a different outlook on it compared to when people originally played it back when it was released and there was all the negativity surrounding the game. And I'm going to give you my thoughts as I played through this game. So I'm going to start right off with the graphics and I'm just going to quickly go over them. It's a Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy games are very high budget. The graphics are very high production values. The in-game graphics are incredibly good, and the battle graphics, especially the attack animations and all that, really well done. I thought the art style was pretty decent too. Some of the areas look absolutely incredible. But that's just going to cover the graphics. It's a Final Fantasy game, high budget, high production values. No surprise there. Now I'm going to jump right into the gameplay and I'm going to get talking about that. The gameplay of Final Fantasy XIII is that it is a Japanese turn-based RPG and it plays like a very linear one. A big thing that a lot of people did or didn't like about the game was that it was very linear, and that could be something that appeals to you or doesn't appeal to you. To give you an idea of how linear the progression in this game is, you go through 13 chapters in the main story, with each chapter having a set of events that happen, and you go through a few dungeons or areas, and most of the areas are literally just a straight path with maybe a branching path here and there that leads to a chest, a battle, or a dead end, and then you go back to the main path and you continue along through the dungeon. As you navigate through areas, you can kind of jump onto certain places to get around obstacles and whatnot, but that's about it. It's very straightforward. Some people may or may not like that. If you really like to explore, that might bug you. If you don't like exploration, you don't like getting lost, you like things being straightforward, you might like that. Looking past that, the way the battles and the encounters work in the game is that the encounters are not random encounters. You don't move around and then get into a battle. Instead, you see an enemy in the area you're going through, and you come into contact with them, and then the battle begins. A good RPG to kind of compare it to is, say, Persona 3 or Persona 4 with the way the encounters work. So you come into contact with the enemy, and then the battle starts. If you sneak up on the enemy without them noticing you, then the battle will begin with you having an advantage, and vice versa. If the enemy attacks you and you got your back to them, you're going to have a slight disadvantage at the start of a battle. And then when you finally do get into a battle, you'll notice that Final Fantasy XIII has a drastically different battle system from other games of the series, while still retaining that core ATB battle system. So here's another controversial aspect of Final Fantasy XIII is the combat. The combat in the game still utilizes the active time battle system with the gauges, where you wait for the gauge to fill up and then it's your turn and you choose a command. However, unlike previous games of the series, you do not have full control over all three of your characters they use in combat. And instead, you only have control over your party leader, whoever you assign that to be, and the other characters are AI controlled. The battles in the game are very fast-paced, but you may be asking yourself, how is this game strategic if you cannot control anyone but the main character who is the leader of your party? Not the main character, but the leader of your party. And the way it is because of the mechanics of the battle system. There's something called the paradigm shift in battles you can do, where you use it, you press L1 for the PS3 version, which is the version I played through, and you can switch to another role. And basically, imagine if you were playing Final Fantasy I, you had an all-warrior party, and you switched in the middle of a battle on the fly from an all-four-warrior party to two black mages, a white mage, and a warrior. That's what the paradigm shift battle system is like in Final Fantasy XIII. You can switch paradigm roles, which are like the job classes and roles in Final Fantasy XIII. There's the Commando role, which is like a physical attack damage class. The Ravager, which is kind of like a black mage one. The Medic, which is like a white mage, and there's a couple others in the game. And the battle system and the battles heavily revolve around the paradigm shift mechanic. You have to switch to the right paradigms and make the right decisions in doing so in order to survive battles in the game. Another mechanic that adds a lot more strategy and some innovation to the battle systems of the game is the stagger mechanic. The stagger mechanic is every enemy has a gauge called the stagger gauge. And as you do damage to the enemy, especially if you use the Ravager class and you hit them with magic that they're weak to, the stagger gauge will quickly build. Once it goes past a certain point, the enemy becomes staggered. And when the enemy becomes staggered, the damage they take greatly increases, meaning that staggering enemies is a key. However, you cannot just play super defensively and wait to patiently get the enemy staggered. You have to stagger enemies quick, because if you don't keep attacking, keep that pressure on, and stagger them soon, the stagger gauge for them will begin to quickly decrease. So that adds another strategy, or layer of strategy to the combat in the game, is keeping up with the staggering, not playing too defensively, and making sure that you're staggering the enemies and doing major damage to them. Now, this is also one of the most challenging games of the entire series. A lot of people who didn't like this game said, oh, you can just mash X to win throughout the entire game. Let me tell you something. Many of these people, and I'm not trying to sound elitist, and if you do disagree with me, that's perfectly fine, but many of these people who said that did not play more than like an hour or two of the game. In the first two chapters of the game, which are only like 2 hours, and I know that sounds short, but the later chapters get way longer, the battle system fully unlocks, and you start unlocking paradigm shifts, and you start beginning to understand the stagger mechanics better. And you really have to pick the right paradigms in battles, and you have to use advanced RPG battle strategies, such as fully debuffing enemies, buffing your party, and then attacking after that, and keeping your party healed and anticipating powerful attacks from enemies and bosses. This is not the average Final Fantasy game where you can just spam physical attacks, use healing magic, and win every battle. Even the early battles in the game, such as early normal battles, can kill you if you make bad decisions in battle. One thing that players may or may not like too is that the game forces you to use party members a lot throughout the game until way later in the game, all the way in Chapter 8 out of 13, do you finally get to form your own parties and whatnot. You'll be stuck using like 2 to 3 characters, and you have to use them throughout that entire story chapter. That kind of annoyed me. I think it kind of prevents you from getting too comfortable with tactics, and while that is a good thing and that might appeal to some people because they like being forced to use different strategies and whatnot, I would like it to be less forceful. You know, I don't want to have to keep being being forced to use certain party members. It's really aggravating because I would get used to using these strategies, and then all of a sudden I'm using different characters in another chapter, and I have to relearn all my strategies over again. Another thing about Final Fantasy XIII that may or may not appeal to some RPG players or gamers in general is that the leveling is limited in the game. You level up through something called the Crystarium, and you gain Crystarium points from winning battles, and you spend them on the Crystarium to individually develop each paradigm rule for a character. Each paradigm rule, such as Commando, Ravager, Medic, etc., has its own Crystarium. And the abilities you learn while going through the Crystarium and spending your Crystarium points throughout the Crystarium, that respective paradigm, stays to the paradigm, by any stacks you gain, regardless of what paradigm rule it is, applies to the character as a whole, and doesn't matter if you switch from a Medic to a Commando, you'll still have the same HP, same attack power, etc. And the game will basically let you get the Crystarium to a certain point, and then you have to reach the next story chapter in the game to further expand the Crystarium so that you can level up your characters and become more powerful. So if you're hoping this is a game where you can grind like crazy and just overcome every obstacle, this is not going to be the game for you. And the game forces you to go through the game at certain points of strength, and you will have to win with strategy. So some people may or may not like that about the game. And as said, this game is super linear. And not only is the game very straightforward in the way you travel, you almost cannot backtrack anywhere. There's very low backtracking you can do in the entire game, and that might or might not appeal to you. Overall, that's going to about cover it for the gameplay. The only other gripe I would say, and this kind of has to do with the graphics and the gameplay because it affects the gameplay, but it's a fault of the graphics, is that the game has frame rate drops because the graphics are a little too powerful for the PS3 and Xbox 360 to handle. So that pretty much covers the gameplay. Next up is the story of the game. The story of the game follows a woman named Lightning who gets on board this train where her and other people on there are going to be purged. A purge is an event where the road of Cocoon, there's two roads in the game, Cocoon and Pulse, Grand Pulse as it's called. Basically, in Cocoon, they believe that there's these people called Pulse Lessees who have been infected by this virus or disease of sorts that gain like magical powers and become very powerful. Cocoon believes these people to be a massive threat to their society and rogues, so they pretty much commit mass genocide, and the government does everything they can to eliminate them. And because society is so brainwashed and led to believe that the Pulse Lessee are so bad, they pretty much follow along and support the government in getting rid of the Pulse Lessee. Well, Lightning gets on the train to go save her sister Sarah, who had been crystallized after becoming a Pulse Lessee and fulfilling what's called a focus, which is a goal that they obtain where they vaguely get a weird vision that kind of very vaguely tells them something they have to do, and they have to fulfill that, or else the Pulse Lessee, whoever has the focus, turns into a Seep, which is like a mindless zombie if they do not accomplish their focus. So Lightning gets on board the train, meets a man named Saz. The two of them crash the train after pretty much killing all the guards on there and knocking them out and pretty much just destroying them in general. They get off the train in the city, and the whole place is a war zone. And you go through there, and they meet up with a whole bunch of other characters, and they eventually run into a fallacy. A fallacy is like a god-like creature that has powers beyond human comprehension. And most people don't understand what their purpose is or who they are. They really don't understand them at all. They're kind of a mystery in the world of Final Fantasy XIII, the two worlds of Cocoon and Grand Pulse. Well, while encountering this fallacy, your party gets turned all into Pulse Lessees, all the characters there with you, and you all gain a focus, and everyone has a similar focus. So the goal of the entire game then becomes these group of people who really don't get along with each other having to come together to fulfill these focuses before they turn into Seep, the mindless zombie creatures, and to save Lightning's sister Sarah, who had crystallized after fulfilling her focus. So that's going to just about almost wrap up the story. I will say I thought the story was pretty good, me personally, but it's just going to depend on you. It's a very subjective thing. The story has a lot of character development, but there were some characters that really annoyed me, and they might annoy you too. When you start playing the game, if they annoy you, you probably definitely know who they're going to be. But that's just going to about to cover the story of the game. Now I'm going to get on to the music, which is just going to be the final section before I overall cover the game again. The music is really good in the game, in my opinion. It's an orchestrated soundtrack. It is a very modern soundtrack. There's a lot of themes or different styles of music like jazz, techno, orchestrating music. The battle theme in particular of the game, Blinded by Light, is one of the best battle themes I've probably ever heard in an RPG. Really good. The voice acting too, really solid throughout the game. Again, high production value game, good voice actors that voice act the characters pretty well. Overall, my thoughts on Final Fantasy XIII are this, and this is going to determine whether or not it appeals to you. If you don't like linearity, you're not going to like the game. If you like linearity, you're going to like the game. If you can't stand not being able to backtrack, don't play it. If that doesn't bug you, play it. If the battle system with the paradigm shift mechanic, the stagger mechanic, the fact that it's very challenging interests you, and you're experienced in RPGs, try it. If that's not really your thing, you might not like it. And overall, you're just going to really have to take into account all those factors that I mentioned and decide really whether the game is for you, because that is the point of this assessment and this review, is to explain what the gameplay is like to you and just to give you a little insight into what the game is like and to give you an opinion a few years after the game has come out when all the opinions have died down and there's no two schools of thought of, oh, I hate this game or oh, I like it. It is very different from other Final Fantasy games, but in my personal view, it's a very innovative direction that the series took, and you are going to decide for yourself whether or not you like it. If you enjoyed listening to this review, tell other people about it. Please